supports all of that, but is sensitive to the suggestion he's doing this because of any pressure from Beijing.
China will speak on behalf of China. My job is to speak on behalf of Australia. And Australia has an interest in free and fair trade. We're a trading nation. And Australia believes that there should be international norms of trade, that we should abide by them.
So the Prime Minister, yes, supports that free trade, doesn't want those tariffs, wants to see World Trade Organization rules upheld and strengthened. What we saw in the one-on-one meeting on trade, though, was clearly a very positive sign from Xi Jinping. He says we've now reached a turnaround after twists and turns in the relationship over the last 10 years. It obviously included those trade sanctions from China. He now wants to see trade and investment grow between the two countries and invited the Prime Minister back to visit China next year.
David, the Prime Minister says he also raised Australia's concerns with China. What were they?
Yeah, look, this is the list of concerns that we're used to seeing Prime Ministers now raise with China. They go to human rights, and right now that includes the detention and the suspended death sentence for Australian citizen Young Heng Jun in China. It includes concerns over what China's doing with its threatening behaviour towards Taiwan, its intimidation in the South China Sea over territorial claims there, cyber security as well, and the recent ICBM, International Intercontinental Ballistic Missile testing by China. So Anthony Albanese raised all of that, as well as China's support for Russia in its ongoing invasion in Ukraine. In response, well, no commitment, and doesn't sound like any sort of sensible reaction from the Chinese president. He's used to these concerns being raised, not just by Australia, and no doubt listens to them politely, but doesn't think he's going to change course.
And what else has the PM been doing there?
Look, he's also met Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, today. They discussed climate change, and you would expect, although not confirmed, that they informally discussed Donald Trump as well. They're AUKUS partners. They're wondering what will happen under Donald Trump to that AUKUS agreement. He also held a meeting of what's called MICTA, which is a grouping of mid-level powers: Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, Turkey, Australia. Tomorrow he meets Narendra Modi on the sidelines of the summit here, the Indian Prime Minister, before this G20 wraps up.
That is the ABC's political lead, David Spears, in Rio there, speaking to Gemma Burnett. Let's go to the Middle East now, where we have an interesting development this morning. You might remember Israel launching airstrikes on Iran last month. Well, now the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the Israeli forces hit parts of Iran's nuclear program. The attacks were in retaliation for a barrage of more than 180 missiles launched by Iran at Israel at the start of October. Our Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran reports from Jerusalem. In a speech to the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, Benjamin Netanyahu gave some new details about Israel's strike on Iran last month. We knew that the IDF had targeted weapons manufacturing facilities, but Mr. Netanyahu says it also hit part of the country's nuclear capabilities. He hasn't gone into detail as to exactly what was hit, but we know that Iran was denying any such facility was attacked at the time of those strikes. Mr. Netanyahu saying that Iran still has the capability to try to develop nuclear weapons. In Lebanon, mourners held a funeral for Mohammed Afif, the public spokesman of Hezbollah, who'd been warning recently the group was in conflict with Israel for the long haul, and he was killed in an unannounced strike on central Beirut on Sunday. Further strikes on Beirut by the IDF on what it says were Hezbollah targets continued through the night, smoke still pouring from pockets of the city after sunrise. Israel saying its operations in southern Lebanon destroyed Hezbollah facilities and uncovered weapons stockpiles. Weapons such as those being fired into northern Israel by Hezbollah, its so-called Iron Dome air defense system picking most out of the sky. The Biden administration's negotiator, the Special Envoy Amos Hochstein, is expected to travel to Beirut this week, trying to get some further progress on a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah. For its part, the Lebanese government is making some positive noises about the prospect of a truce, but there may well be some sticking points still, particularly the demand from Israel that Hezbollah withdraw its troops from southern Lebanon and that Israel reserve its right to fire upon Lebanon if it believes there is a threat to the country. In
In Gaza, Israel's campaign against Hamas continues with a strike on a building in Gaza City, which killed 7, according to local authorities. Neighbours said the house was mainly full of women and children. Further south, authorities said 2 children were among those killed in a strike which hit tents for displaced Palestinians in Khan Yunis. Israel has repeatedly accused Hamas of hiding a few civilians and hasn't commented on the strike. Meanwhile, the UN's aid agency for Palestinians said there was a serious and severe case of looting of an aid convoy late last week. UNRWA saying that of 109 trucks that were in Gaza, 97 were targeted, with drivers held at gunpoint and forced to unload aid. UNRWA saying that it will only further exacerbate the concerns already existing about supplies such as desperately needed food not getting to parts of Gaza. Matthew Doran with that update.
ABC News Radio.
ABC News Radio.
Tens of thousands of protesters are converging on New Zealand's capital, Wellington, today, after marching for 9 days against the government's plans to reinterpret the Waitangi Treaty. Police have issued a travel warning this morning, with extra police deployed to beef up security as well. Māori leaders say plans by New Zealand's centre-right government to redefine the treaty's principles will undermine the rights of the country's Indigenous people, who make up about 20% of the population. Legislation to rewrite the principles went before New Zealand's Parliament for a first hearing last week. Jamie Ensor is a reporter for the New Zealand Herald and is in Wellington.
We're expecting up to 30,000 people to march through central Wellington towards Parliament this morning. Early in the morning, they began moving through the outskirts of Wellington into the central city. There were thousands on the streets this morning, causing some disruption to traffic. They're going to culminate at an inner park in central Wellington before some speeches and then moving towards Parliament. As you mentioned, this is in opposition to the government's policies towards Māori, and the hikoi, which is Māori for march or walk, began more than a week ago at both the top of New Zealand and right at the south of New Zealand, and they've been walking certain parts of the country, often leading to road closures and disruption, and driving other parts to be here in the capital today. And there's already a massive security presence here at the Parliament. Barricades are up between the area that protesters will enter into and the Parliament. There are police officers at different points of the precinct, and staff are being required to enter through specific entrances. Public tours have been cancelled, and when the House sits later in the day, no one will be allowed into the public gallery. So there's a lot of preparation that's gone into responding to this protest today, but all signs indicate that it is going to be a peaceful protest, and I guess police are just wanting to make sure that they have the resources to respond to any eventuality.
How significant is this march? Has New Zealand had something on this scale before on this issue, on the treaty?
It's certainly expected to be the largest protest in recent years. There was an occupation of Parliament's grounds about 2 years ago over COVID-19 measures, but this is likely to be much larger than that. About 20 years ago, there was another protest with regards to Māori issues regarding Māori rights to parts of the foreshore and the seabed of New Zealand, and that was very significant. That was huge, and it's likely that this protest today could be of a similar size. Police said this morning that they're expecting at minimum 10,000, but as I mentioned, it's likely it could grow to up to 30,000 people. So it is hugely significant, and it also, I guess, culminates the first year of this government and the feeling amongst Māori towards how this government is approaching their issues.
What are the changes that the New Zealand government is seeking to introduce in the way that the Treaty of Waitangi is interpreted and utilised?
Yeah, so the Treaty Principles Bill is that main, factor that is bringing all these people together. It's the creation of the ACT Party, which is one of the members of the government here in New Zealand, and it seeks to define in law what it calls the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. That, of course, being New Zealand's foundational document signed in 1840 between representatives of the British Crown and Māori. There are references to these principles throughout New Zealand's laws, and they're meant to explain how those those laws give effect to the Treaty of Waitangi and obligations under the treaty, but they're currently not defined by Parliament, and that's left, like the courts and tribunals, to have to explain what these principles mean. And ACT believes that the Parliament should define them so that their role in legislation can be more clearly interpreted and understood. And some of those principles that have been decided upon by the ACT Party include that all New Zealanders are equal under the law and that the government has authority over everyone. But critics say that's too simplistic an approach, that the principles don't actually accurately reflect the intention of the Treaty of Waitangi and what it secured for Māori. And that's what's really fueled this hurt, this emotion amongst the protesters. They say it's divisive and that it's not accurately reflecting what they were promised about 200 years ago. That's what's fueling these people to come out on the streets today.
Jamie Ensor, a political reporter at the New Zealand Herald at the Parliament building in Wellington, speaking there with Sally Sara, as he said, expecting somewhere between 10 and 15,000 protesters to appear outside of the parliamentary building today. We'll keep you updated as that story unfolds. Let's take a quick look at the share markets. The stocks are rallying, it seems, here in the local share markets. The ASX 200 is up 0.7%, as is the All Ordinaries. It's up 0.69%. The Australian dollar is trading down slightly. It's purchasing just on 65 US cents, 51.2 Great British pence, 61.3 euro cents and 100 Japanese yen. Let's take a look at the weather now. Starting in Brisbane, it's currently 24 degrees with rain expected throughout today. In Sydney it's 17 degrees, showers possible. Canberra 20 degrees right now, partly cloudy conditions. In Melbourne it's 16 degrees at the moment, some cloud about, but that's clearing throughout today. In Hobart it's partly cloudy and 14 degrees. In Adelaide 19 degrees at the moment, mostly sunny today, heading for a top of 25. In Perth it's 24 degrees with a shower or two expected, and in Darwin it's showers and maybe even a storm. It's currently 31 degrees. Time for 5 minutes of news.
Greg Lynn has formally lodged an appeal in to overturn over the death of retiree Carol Clay. Jetstar pilot was jailed for the murder of Miss Clay in the Wanangata Valley 4 years ago. Ruled he was not guilty of the murder of Miss Clay's secret lover Russell Hill. Lynn's legal challenge was formally submitted to late on Monday, 3 days after the standard 28-day window to expired. The jury's verdict and the prison sentence imposed by it'll now be up to the court to decide whether to consider the appeal. If it does and the appeal is successful, the court trial on the single murder charge. Radio veteran Alan Jones has been charged after a major investigation by detectives from the Child Abuse Squad. New counts of assault with acts of indecency have been laid relating to an alleged ninth victim. 83-year-old Mr. Jones was yesterday charged with 20 against 8 alleged victims. He was ordered to surrender his passport to the court next month. Finding by the Privacy Committee, retail giant Bunnings breached privacy laws by using technology on its customers. The decision is an investigation by the regulator and is expected to have for how Australian business in the future. The regulator found Bunnings interfered with the privacy of hundreds of customers between 2018 and 2021 and did not consent to use the technology on them. Bunnings has been in the future, personal or sensitive information within a year. Scientists say cyclones and driven heat stress have contributed to the worst coral losses seen on the Great Barrier Reef in nearly 40 years. Preliminary results from the Australian Institute of parts of the 20 tourist hub of Cairns and Lizard Island have lost more than a cover. Dr. It's a substantial loss.
We've seen lost over a third of the coral cover prior to this bleaching of serious impact and serious losses. We've seen
A top level government has agreed to a ceasefire. The West now Australian Speaker had voted that they oppose the view of a few comments on the content. Followed by a ground invasion in the south. Has been killed in Lebanon eastern. The country